Let me say it again. I believe health is a right of all people. I will fight for a Medicare for all single-payer system. Second of all right? You want to talk about rationing? You got 29 million people in this country who have no health insurance. How's that for rationing? They can't go to the doctor.
Welcome to the MTC Report, the news behind the news with journalist Mark Taylor-Canfield. We offer you independent voices and underreported stories about topics you won't hear anywhere else. Join us as we delve into the deeper issues behind the news stories of the day on the MTC Report.
Don't go anywhere. The MTC Report with Mark Taylor-Canfield continues next.
Another election, another convention, another media intervention, another reason, another season to vote for Bernie.
It's not one thing. This is a pattern of divisiveness, of a very dark and in many ways dangerous vision of our country where he incites violence.
Hi, my name is Mark Taylor-Canfield. I'm a journalist and a musician. I write a blog at Daily Kos, and I'm contributing editor for Democracy Watch News. I can also be heard every Tuesday on the Jeff Santos Show as the guest journalist. So today I'm talking about the third U.S. presidential debate, which maybe was not as extremely lowbrow as the second, but definitely displayed more of the characteristics that make U.S. voters dislike Republican candidate Donald Trump. His bullying, his constant complaints and interruptions continued to increase his reputation as the least rational candidate.
It's not one thing. This is a pattern.
Yet, as Hillary Clinton points out, the GOP candidate is completely unapologetic about any accusations of corruption directed towards him. So he's cast himself as nothing but a bad reality TV star during this election season and made these debates into a bad reality TV show. And as I take note of the many international news reports coming in from around the world, I have to say that I'm a little embarrassed and disheartened. I mean, is this really the face that we want to show the rest of the world? One also trembles at the thought of his proposed new Trump TV network, especially when you consider just how willing he is to launch into potentially libelous charges without any verifiable sources to back him up. And you thought Fox News was unfair?
It's not one thing. This is a pattern.
Here's an example of Trump's willingness to make slanderous accusations, referring to the Clinton Foundation, quote, "It's a criminal enterprise," unquote. The fact is that the Donald is launching his accusations of corruption and criminality from a very weak position on many fronts. I will remind the listener that the Attorney General of New York State sent a cease and desist letter to the Trump Foundation because the organization has been operating without proper certification. But what really worries a lot of the public is just how nasty and uncivilized Trump has become during the campaign season, causing many lifelong Republicans to flee the party in disgust. There is apparently no step too low for Trump to take. He dragged the audience and the moderators and the rest of the nation during the second debate through a dark miasma of sexual and personal innuendo and crass posturing.
A pattern of divisiveness, of a very dark and in many ways dangerous vision where he incites violence.
I have talked to doctors who have told me that people walk in the door extremely sick. And doctors say, why didn't you come in here 6 months ago when you first felt your symptoms? And people said, I had no health insurance, or I had a high
This is the MTC Report, the news behind the news with journalist Mark Taylor-Canfield.
We can have a world world-class healthcare system without waiting lines.
Donald is pushed on something which is obviously uncomfortable, like what these women are saying. He immediately goes to denying responsibility. And it's not just about women. He never apologizes or says he's sorry for anything.
There is nothing in recent memory that can compare with that lowbrow and distasteful exercise in political self-destruction that we witnessed during the second debate. Hillary Clinton has labeled Trump as a, quote, misogynist, unquote, and, quote, racist, unquote. Well, at a speech in Seattle on October 15th, Bernie Sanders echoed that same point of view, and it was reiterated again during that rally by Washington State congressional candidate Pramila Jayapal.
So we know what he has said, and women. He went after Mr. and Mrs. Khan, the parents of a young man who died serving our country, a Gold Star family because of their religion.
Hillary Clinton described Trump's dangerous and frightening legacy when she confronted him on the violent tendencies of some of his election rally participants. But in his usual arrogant and immature style, Trump simply nodded and then accused Clinton of causing the violence herself.
So it's not one thing. This is a pattern of divisiveness, of a very dark and in many ways dangerous vision of our country where he incites violence. I hope that as we move in the last weeks of this campaign, more and more people will understand what's at stake in this election. It really does come down to what kind of country we are going to have.
So sad when she talks about violence at my rallies, and she caused the violence.
Don't go anywhere. The MTC report with Mark Taylor-Canfield continues next.
Currently, our national news media and our political candidates suffer from an unfortunate lack of literacy, coupled with a serious dearth of expertise in logic and rhetoric. The results are very clear for all of us to see, because El Duce is now running for the White House. But ignorance is not a good excuse for the popularity of a man like Donald Trump. Inadequate education in law and physics has resulted in an uninformed electorate, for sure. There are millions of voters who are now all too glad to swallow false accusations, hook, line, and sinker, as they say. And as P.T. Barnum was quoted as saying, a sucker is born every day. Apparently, Donald Trump's nomination for the presidency is one fine example of that tried and true adage. So I wish that this election were about real issues that affect real people's lives on a daily basis, like healthcare, the environment, economic inequality. I could go on. But Trump's personal cult of fascism and intolerance must be challenged if we're to have any hope of protecting our constitutional civil liberties. The work of many generations is now at stake. The United States can't afford to go back to the bad old days of Jim Crow and religious prosecution of immigrants. Donald Trump is a privileged right-wing demagogue who has arisen out of the financial aristocracy just like George W. Bush. So any of his claims about supporting the working class and the average voter are patent lies. We all know by now that his only real goal is to increase his own personal enrichment and to make a power grab for the benefit of his family. And there is a long historical precedent for this phenomena. During the ancient oligarchical eras of Greece and Rome, many demagogues rose to power by feeding on the sorrows of the poor and the underprivileged. But there's already an economic and political elite in this country, so we certainly don't need a dictator. All residents of the U.S. have an obligation to counter his egotistical demagoguery with facts and figures. The public can't allow his media manipulations to stand unchallenged. Abject gullibility is the worst sin in politics. Most often it leads to the election of tyrants who capitalize on extremism. And two of the necessary ingredients for this type of undemocratic coup are the following. 1, an uneducated public. And 2, a prejudiced electorate.
He went after John McDermott, a prisoner of war, said he prefers people who aren't captured. He went after a federal judge born in Indiana, but who Donald said couldn't be trusted to try the fraud and racketeering case against Trump University because his parents were Mexican. So it's not one thing. This is a pattern of divisiveness, of a very dark and in many ways dangerous vision of our country.
My point is, Chuck, there's massive rationing in America. It is rationing based on money. If you don't have money,
spin, it's a lot of hype. And Hillary's nervous. She answers twice. It's really thrilling that they're so willing to vote for Bernie. Yeah, the Bernie Sanders guy. One side it votes for Bernie, but the leaders, they want Hillary. He's doing phone banks, he's taking polls, and every day his campaign grows. And don't forget, folks, that's what you get, folks. We're voting for Bernie. Bernie Sanders guy. It's one big mess, the party's splitting. And can't you guess, he feels neglected, and she's suspected of sleeping with Wall Street.
Where he incites violence, where he applauds people who are pushing and pulling and punching at his rallies. That is not who America is.
The only bulwarks protecting us from right-wing, left-wing extremism are authentic democratic movements led by altruistic truth seekers. In order to correct the political and economic corruption we're encountering, the people must demand transparency and accountability. Because there's a much more diverse and friendly future waiting for those who embrace humane, rational, and compassionate values, but only if we're dedicated enough to get out there and vote. This is Mark Taylor-Canfield for the MTC Report.
I have talked to doctors who have told me that people walk in the door extremely sick. And doctors say, why didn't you come in here 6 months ago when you first felt your symptoms? And people said, I had no health insurance, or I had a high
This is the MTC Report, the news behind the news with journalist Mark Taylor-Canfield.
We can have a world-class healthcare system without waiting lines, spending the same amount.
This is the MTC Report, the news behind the news with journalist Mark Taylor-Canfield.
I've been criticized saying that, let me say it again. I believe health is a right of all people. I will fight for a Medicare for all single-payer system. Second of all, all right? You want to talk about rationing? You got 29 million people in this country who have no health insurance. How's that for rationing? They can't go to the doctor.
Now here's a place you always meet a lot of friends.